The regular season's over for the Huskies, and the question is really what went wrong? And that's a very big question because, in my opinion, a whole lot went wrong for this Husky basketball team. But just starting off the segment, the first real issue that plagued this team, it plagued them right at the start before the season even started, you could say. And that's the 2020 recruiting class. They had no incoming scholarship freshmen. They had two transfers, really, as the only guys coming in to make an impact. That's Cole Badgema and Eric Stevenson. Both those guys struggled immensely to start the year, as they weren't used to playing that 2-3 defense and the offense that the Huskies ran. So that was clearly the first issue that just plagued the Huskies for kind of the rest of the season. Stevenson came into UW having averaged 11 points per game at Wichita State, shooting 38% from the field and 30% from deep. Not wild numbers, not huge numbers. How much can you expect him to do at UW? Well, at UW, he averaged 2 more minutes per game, averaged 9 points per game, shooting 35% from the field and 30% from deep again. So really, it's the same thing he did at Wichita State. It's all you could have expected from him. And looking at the slow start he had coming into a new offense, he didn't score over 10 points in a game until the 10th game of the year. It took time for him to get used to this offense, especially with the super odd season that they had with COVID. Badgema as well. It took time for him to find his role. He was not a big scorer. He averaged 3 points per game in 15 minutes per game. So maybe the Huskies hoped for more from him. But, I mean, he came from Michigan where he averaged just about that amount of points per game there, playing less minutes, but still, he didn't really score that often. And for him, it took about 14 games for him to really find that consistent role. For the first 13 minutes, or for the first 13 games, he could either play 2 or 3 minutes in a game or 16 or 17. There was no consistency with his role. Obviously, it's tough to get in a good groove and feel confident if you have no idea how much you're going to be playing game in and game out. Really taking a step back, the Huskies after the last season, they lost Isaiah Stewart, Jaden McDaniels, and Miles Carter. Did anyone really expect Eric Stevenson and Cole Badgema to be able to replace that production? No. So that was the first issue, not being able to replace lost talent. Now, the second issue I'm going to get into is just Mike Hopkins being stubborn. Now, he was stubborn in a couple of different ways, but really the main is just running the 2-3 defense to death over the man-to-man defense for too long. We all know Hopkins coming from Syracuse, where it's called the Syracuse defense for a reason, because they live and die by the 2-3. And that's what Hopkins did to start the year. At the start of conference play, there was a stretch where the Husky defense allowed 92 points, 80 points, 91 points, 84, 95, 81, 80, 79 points. Now, that poor run of defensive showing, throughout that run, at some point during it, he should have thought to himself, okay, I think I should probably try something out. But it took all those games until he finally made that change, playing it for the second half of that game against Wazoo, which was the one they allowed 79 points. Now, Hopkins made that change eventually, but that change should have come sooner, a lot sooner. Overall, it took 15 games or 2 months before a noticeable change was made for the Husky defense. Now, after that change, the question is, did they win more games? No, not really. I mean, they won 3 games in that first 15 stretch, and in the final 10 games, they won 2. But what did happen was I think they were more competitive. Now, I know people want wins, but let's face it, this Husky team wasn't built for wins. They had flaws in their roster from the get-go, and were lacking pieces to be a team that could head to the tournament and really make a good push. But back to being competitive. In their first 15 games of the year, now excluding the 3 wins, so out of the 12 losses, only 4 of those losses came by single digits. The other 8 were mostly blowouts by 15 plus. Now looking at the remaining 8 losses, 3 of them were by single digits, so not great. But they were only truly blown out 2 times, losing by 20 plus in games against Stanford and ASU. After watching the games as well, the team just seemed more competitive. The man-to-man defense seemed to cause more issues for a team versus what the zone defense did to other teams, which was just allow anything they wanted on the inside. Now, the final major issue that I'll touch on is just offense as a whole. They really didn't have a true identity. And now last season, when they had Isaiah Stewart, the identity was simple. Get the ball in the post to him. Get Stewart the ball and let him go to work. I think having that identity last year helped contribute to their poor offensive showings and just starts this season. Really, it's the poor offense is because they didn't know how to run an offense. These guys were all there with Isaiah Stewart, or at least most of them. You had Quade Green, Jamal Bay, Hamir Wright. I mean, Nate Roberts was there coming off the bench. Marcus Sahonis, all the guys who really made the impact this year, besides Eric Stevenson and Cole Bajema slightly, they're there last year with Isaiah Stewart, where their job was simple. Pass the ball to Isaiah Stewart and let him go to work. This year, the Huskies' big man was Nate Roberts. And let's face it, his interior offensive post game is not nearly the same level as Stewart's was. So they had to go out there and find a new identity. And what was their identity, I guess you could say? I mean, shooting 3-pointers, I guess they did that quite a bit. They didn't shoot them very well. The Huskies only had 2 players who shot over 40% from deep. They had 3 players shoot over 40% from deep. 2 of those guys only took 4 3-pointers. So really, they only had 1 reliable 3-point shooter game in and game out, and that was Jamal Bay, of course, who shot about 50%. Quade Green, Hamir Wright, Raekwon Battle, Eric Stevenson, all those guys took over 53s on the year, and all of them shot about 30% or worse from deep. That's not a team built for taking a lot of 3-pointers, yet that's what they did. So that's one of those things that the Huskies really did wrong and plagued their season, not being able to figure out how to run an offense that fits their strong suits, which their strong suit was Quade Green driving in and getting buckets. Marcus Sahonis as well, driving in and getting into the paint. So that's really what they should have done more of, kind of pick and rolls instead of pick and pops, where they'd kick it out for a 3-pointer, get it interior for some layups.